Growing up in elementary school, I got bullied a lot, and what that taught me at a very young age was how it feels to be made small, disrespected, insignificant, and just overall feel really terrible. I wasn't doing myself any favors by crying as much as I did, which is almost every day, and I should have stood up for myself. But at the same time, considering my age, I didn't believe that I had that strength in me. And so as I continued to go through my early childhood and continued to develop through my teenage years, that early experience permanently affected who I became as a person. And that meant I became extremely empathetic to other people who also were wronged or had their dignity infringed upon. For a long time, I truly believed that empathy was my superpower, and to a degree, it still is. Because honestly, having empathy is actually a great thing. I'm grateful for having a lot of it because, from what I understand, most people's baselines and how much they can develop it is genetic. So, considering that I have a lot of empathy is what makes me who I am, I find it something to be proud of. I can really put myself in someone's shoes with my imagination. And while sometimes I may not fully understand someone's situation, I can simulate it to a degree in my mind that allows me to feel what they might be feeling. It allows me to see them as a human being and understand their suffering or pain. But there's a problem with empathy that isn't really discussed, and it's that you can have too much of it. And that was the problem I had with my empathy. Because I knew how bad it felt to be a victim, so to speak, I developed a dangerous habit of taking on other people's pain. And this started to drown me. I would see bad shit happening, like wars or like a clip of someone filming someone else being exploited, or children being affected by diseases in third world countries. And it would suffocate me so much that I would have difficulty in finding what makes life worth living and why we're even here in the first place. Bad news would just throw me for a loop some days and just basically make it impossible to have a good day. And this especially is more common and prevalent due to the internet and everyone having cameras in their pockets. Everyone can access everything and see everything. We also have in us the tendency to look at things and find things that outrage or upset us because it tickles parts of our brain a certain way. I remember vividly breaking down in my first girlfriend's car. This was before we started dating because I had watched a video of what the Taliban, I think it was the Taliban in Afghanistan. I forget the details, but basically it was a video of what it was like for people in Afghanistan being oppressed now that the Taliban were regaining power in the country and the country was being cut off from international support. And because of that, they didn't have access to medicine. And in this documentary, they went to this one house where the mother is holding her child, who must have been like 1 year old or not even. And this baby was severely malnourished. I mean, just thinking about this image alone is enough to make me shudder because it's extremely heartbreaking. When I was watching this video, I was at home. It was around midnight or sometime after it. So it was really late. I should have been asleep. I should have been in bed. I was tired. But I just remember breaking down crying as soon as I saw this child and saying, I'm sorry, over and over, even though I wasn't responsible in any way for this person's situation. I was just appalled and defeated at the fact that we weren't helping this person and this much suffering was happening. And so when I spoke to this girl about it, I started crying and I broke down because she's not from this country, but she's from a country in the region. And so this was very early on in our relationship. We were getting to know each other, and basically this was an opening up moment for both of us and an attempt from me trying to, and it was an attempt by me to try and connect with her. But in that moment, I couldn't stop thinking about that. And as I tried to explain my perspective on this subject, I don't remember exactly how it came about, but I started talking about it with her. I couldn't keep my cool, and I just broke down crying, trying to get my words out. And honestly, she told me afterwards that she was shocked that I was so okay with crying in the car with her, especially as we were honestly just barely getting to know each other. We had only known each other for maybe a month or two and gone out 3 times. But fast forward some time, and we started dating at like the week I graduated from university. I really fucked that relationship up, so I'm gonna stop here on that and maybe talk about that in another video. I'll see. But my point in explaining that story is that bad shit would really get to me for the longest time, and it would cause me to have breakdowns sometimes like that. Especially in high school and college, my empathy was really running the show, and it might sound obvious, but it wasn't helping me. Upsetting things would take me out of my own life, and I would lose frame, so to speak. So eventually, I had to say, enough is enough. And the way I figured out how to do that was I came across a David Goggins clip where he says, empathy is a time and place. I had to realize, in order to not drown myself in other people's suffering, I needed to reserve my empathy for certain times and places. I didn't start practicing that until literally the start of last year, but my peace of mind has definitely improved since then. It's interesting because in school now, I work at a school, they teach the kids about empathy a lot and being mindful of the way how our actions and the things we say affect other people, which on the one hand is totally valid. We should not be doing things that infringe on another person's dignity or rights. And for kids especially, they don't really understand at that age that other people have different perspectives and don't think like them and are unique people. If we're being honest, at elementary school, you don't really have a conscience yet. And so while it's an uphill battle, it's definitely good to teach kids when they're young that the world doesn't revolve around them, to be polite and respectful, and to consider how our actions and behaviors affect others. But I also think that now that I'm older, empathy isn't the end all be all. It's not the highest level to operate at, and to some degree it's overrated. And here's why. People who think you need to constantly be empathetic of others don't want you to, or are unable to have boundaries for themselves, or aren't able or aren't willing to let you live for yourself, or are offended by you living for yourself. I say this because it's that time and place thing David Goggins said, right? We don't need to have empathy all the time. There are times where empathy will lead you to extend yourself or take an action that not only isn't in your best interest, but comes at a detriment to yourself in a way that affects your peace of mind. People say being self-interested is bad. I used to think that too, and a lot of problems in the world are definitely created by very self-interested people, but there's also the capacity for a lot of good to be created by being self-interested as well, which is a weird paradox, honestly. You can't pour from an empty cup, and that means having boundaries for your time, energy, goals, and as well as the empathy that we all have and are able to give. I'll give another example to illustrate this, okay? So let's say, for example, you're part of a friend group and it's a diverse one. And in the friend group, there's this girl that you really like and you're honestly crushing on her, or a guy if you're a girl watching this, or whatever, right? So you really like this person, but you're not sure what to do. If you use your empathy to think about how the other person would feel, how the friends in the group would feel by your advance on this person, how the dynamic would be affected, right? All these little things that make up the whole situation with all these people you like and that like you. You might be afraid of admitting how you feel to this other person because it's possible somebody is going to be upset with you. It's not out of the question, right? So empathy might paralyze you into not making a move or bottling up your emotions just to maintain the status quo. But that empathy and care for others is actually hurting you and your own goals, in my opinion. In a sense, while yes, you can have empathy for a moment and recognize how things might be affected by taking this action, at the end of the day, we have to live for ourselves. The old me wouldn't make the move, but the current me would, because I have to take into account what my own desires are. I have to live my own life, be focused on my own life, right? And whatever the repercussions are, accept them. Even if it means that the interest is not reciprocated or the friend group dynamic is affected as a result, at the end of the day, it's okay. I think that might be my biggest critique of empathy, is that for the longest time, it's prevented me from going after what I want and expressing myself. Another example is making people uncomfortable. And fun fact, guys, be willing to make other people uncomfortable. Not in like a creepy stalker or incel kind of way, obviously. I mean in a, I'm going after what I want, and if people are uncomfortable with me striving for my goals and being myself, so be it. In that kind of way, right? This is really nuanced. So I want to clarify with two more examples. So go along with me here. I was at a club last week and I wanted to order some drinks and food. There was an open spot at the bar between two girls sitting next to each other and then another group of guys on the left. And there was space between them, so I went and stood between them, waiting to get someone's attention. And I had to stand there for about 2 minutes because the people behind the bar were not really paying attention. And I could tell the girl on my right next to me was, kind of like, when's this guy gonna get out of my space? What's he doing? Having some weird kind of energy about it. And I didn't really give them my attention, but her friend was definitely looking at me weird from the corner of my eye. I could see it. And my empathetic me from 2 years ago would have apologized and looked to give an explanation or whatever. But I don't do that anymore because in that situation, empathy is not helping me. Quite frankly, it's making me weak, for lack of a better term, and for no particular reason. Eventually, I was able to order my food and drinks, right? But I didn't, and I shouldn't have cared how long I had to stand there and make it awkward for the people next to me to get what I want. And another example is when I spoke with a recruiter earlier in the week. He was pushing really hard on my expectations for salary and the range I was expecting, and I didn't give in because, pro tip guys, don't give employers or recruiters any, I repeat, any information on what you expect salary-wise, okay? He kept pushing, and I said, I can't share it. He explained why he needed that info. Like, he gave his reasoning, and I just replied, I see. And I let the call go completely silent. I just waited for his response. Now, this was very awkward, and most people, when they feel awkward, they try to fill the silence, or maybe they're concerned about what this other person is thinking, right? I didn't care. In this situation, I didn't have any empathy for this guy because I knew I needed to focus on my own goals and my own priorities and my own interests. And this recruiter has his own goals and interests. And it's funny because he even let out a gaffe, like a scoff during our conversation once he realized I wasn't going to give him what he wanted. And in order to keep this conversation going, I pivoted to the roles I was interested in order to get it to move along. By the end of our conversation, I could tell he was not pleased with me, and that's okay. I didn't need to be empathetic there whatsoever, and that meant standing my ground. That meant upholding my boundaries, not only on my salary range expectations, but emotionally. And so here's the advice I want to give to highly empathetic people. Maybe empaths is the term. Your empathy is amazing, and you shouldn't kill it. But imagine your empathy is a sink faucet. Do an audit on how often that faucet is open, and when it is, how much pours out. Because for me, it used to be open all the way, all the time, and it was overflowing my sink. Now I'm reversing in the opposite direction, which if I go too far with can be really bad. So that's why I highly recommend donating to causes, or if you don't have money, volunteering time to continue keeping that faucet lubricated or wheel greased, or whatever it is we want to call it here. But the very last thing I want to make mention of is that some people don't have enough empathy. This might surprise you because we're talking about why empathy shouldn't be too much, but I just really briefly want to say that I have witnessed people who lack empathy, and that's also really bad for its own reasons. And I'm going to give my friend as an example. He can have sympathy for people sometimes, but he often lacks empathy, and because of that, he sometimes makes fun of things he doesn't understand or other people's situations because he's not able to put himself in those people's situations. And even though I love this friend of mine, that would really irk me for the longest time because I would always think to myself, like, would you laugh at this guy being hurt, or that guy being exploited, or even that guy, being bald on his crown, right? Like, just put yourself in their shoes for a second and then realize it's their life and you just need to leave them alone. And you don't need to pass judgment. There's no reason to. And actually, in fact, passing judgment is a very insecure thing to do. But growing up is realizing that not everyone will think the same way, obviously. The advice I should give him, or I should have given him a while ago by now, that I want to pass along to people who are listening to this that may not have so much empathy, is to just try to put yourself in other people's shoes for a moment. Like I said, time and place. Do it for just a moment, okay? So that you understand their situation, and then you can let go of that emotion so you can continue to live your life and not lose your own frame. Because I think if we all had empathy in the appropriate times and places, the world would be a much better place. It's a balance, and I think we all tend to swing too far in one direction or the other, but it's possible to strike the right range in the balance. And I think I'm getting very close to that. So if you have your own experience with empathy and how it changed you or what you're doing with it, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear about your experience or perspective. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you very much for clicking on the video and listening all the way. If you really enjoyed this content that I'm putting out, please click the like and subscribe button, and I'll chat with you all next week. Peace.